In this video, we are going to be talking about if-else statements. Now, if you recall, in previous videos, we discussed if statements with single Boolean expressions, if statements with multiple Boolean expressions, and we learned that if statements are simply used to determine whether or not, based on a condition being true, a particular set of code should be executed or not. We use the if-else, or the if, simply for determining whether a block of code or set of code should be executed. In this video, we're going to learn about the if-else statement and how we can use it to branch the logic of our code. So let's go ahead and begin by setting up our project. So we've got Visual Studio Code open here. We're on the initial screen that you see when you open Visual Studio Code and you don't have a project open. If you have a project open, close this folder. You should see code, do open, and then you can run through going to a folder that you want to open. Or just click on Visual Studio Code and you'll get that introductory page. So let's go ahead and create our folder for today's practice. So you'll notice in my videos going forward that I do like to keep my code safe and protected, and for that I like to use Git. And Git is a source code management tool that software developers use all across the world. It is probably the most used source management tool in the software development community. So if you don't know much about Git or you haven't gone through the module on Git, make sure you pause this video, jump in, go learn about Git, and begin practicing the use of Git through all of these tutorial videos as you code along with me. Learning to become extremely competent with Git is extremely important to your software development career. So go learn about Git, then come back to this video and follow along. So under my user account right here, Tim, I have a folder called dev. Now I created that folder. This is just how I like to structure my file and folder system on my computer. Under dev is where I keep all of my software projects. And then I have a repo folder where I like to keep all of my software projects. And I've got other repositories here as well. We're going to be using the Neumont Studios repository because right now we're doing a screencast, so I want to keep the demo code all up to date. So I'm going to go to JavaScript because that's the programming language we're doing this video in. And I'm going to create a new folder for 05-if.else.statements. And I'm going to use this as my project folder. Now again, you can name this whatever you would like to. This is just so I know what video or screencast this particular project goes with. So you can just name this if-else statements on your hard drive. Go ahead and click open. We now have a new project open. Right here is where all of your folders are going to go if you're unfamiliar with Visual Studio Code. And since we are going to be executing JavaScript and we're going to be doing it just to the console, we're not going to worry about HTML or CSS or running anything in the browser. We're going to run it all locally. So let's go ahead and add a new JavaScript file, and we're just going to call it if-else.js. And then that file should open up inside of your editor. Now, as we were talking about, if statements are used simply to tell the JavaScript execution environment that if some condition evaluates to true, we want to execute this code, right? And if it evaluates to false, then we want this code to, we want to not execute this code, right? So really, this just allows us to conditionally execute some code. Now, if we go back to a previous lesson and we talk about the logic tree that we examined earlier, it was that generic logic tree that said, should I X or should I do this? X is our variable for some activity we want to do, like game or go to the zoo or something like that. And really, the question evaluates to a true or false or a yes or no most of the time, with some situations where it might not evaluate to a true or false, but we deal with that in a different way in our code. So here, we're looking at this, should I do this, yes or no? And in this logic tree, if it's yes, then we go do it. If it's no, we might do something else, or we might just end it there. And then down here you can see very similar things like that. So why do I feel like doing X? Well, this right here equates not to a if-else, but equates to a switch statement, which we're going to learn about earlier. But if we move down a little bit further, do I want to understand my boredom? That equates to a yes or no. And then we would go on to do something else or perform some other action. Same thing here. Do I want to understand my thrill seeking? Oops, we got a spelling error right there. It's a yes or a no. And if yes, we would move on to do something. And if no, we would move on to do something else. So you can see the if-else statement is what allows us to do this branching of our logic when we are coding. So let's learn about an if statement. So just like our logic tree right here, so looking for a thrill. All right. So right here, we're looking for a thrill. And a bunch of code has been executed up here to determine what the thrill is. And so let's say that a new variable was introduced and selected thrill equals gaming. All right. Now, what an if-else does for us is it allows us to, if a particular condition equates to true, have some code execute, and if it isn't what we're looking for, then we execute some other code in its place. So in this case, for a contrived example, to try to keep it simple, we've got a selected thrill based on our logic tree right here. And if it is gaming, so if thrill is gaming, we want to do something inside of here, okay? And the else is, well, if it's not gaming, then we're going to go ahead and do this. So let's get rid of our false here, which would always make it go down here. And let's do a comparison or ask a question that results in a true or false answer. So this one right here, this if pertains to gaming. And we're going to go ahead and let's check to see if selected thrill is equal to gaming. Oops. Now, if selected thrill, the value contained within this variable, within this little data container, if the string held in there or the data is equal to the string gaming, then we're going to go ahead and execute this. So let's go ahead and give ourselves some output that shows that this condition ended up being true. In other words, the selected thrill really does equal gaming. All right, so you selected gaming, what a thrill. And then if it's not, we're going to go ahead and you did not select gaming. Let's go ahead and put a not in there. And let's make it capital so we can really tell. All right, so now if we execute this, so go to debug and then go ahead and start without debugging. We should see your debug console pop up here, and you'll see the output to the console right here. Let's see if we can get this console output to get any bigger. Oh, that makes everything really big. All right. Maybe that's just a little bit too big. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right. So if the variable selected thrill contains gaming, then selected thrill, when compared against the string gaming, we see that these two are equal. And therefore, the output we get to the console with console.log, calling the log function on the console object, we output the string we give it, and we see that you selected gaming. What a thrill. All right. So let's add a little bit to this example, and let's say that we also want to handle the case where it is something other than gaming. So let's copy this code right here, put it down here, and let's say that this one pertains to skiing. All right, skiing. All right, and with skiing, we want to go ahead and change this to skiing. And we're just going to do copy and paste, although that is bad practice in programming. You want to make sure that you reduce as much copying and pasting as possible, because that's where bugs happen. But since we're doing a little simple example here, a little copy and paste isn't a big deal. So, pertains to skiing, skiing. We're checking to see if the selected thrill contains the keyword skiing, or that string skiing. If it is, then we'll go ahead and output very similar things we did to gaming. So right now, save our code, and if we execute it, debug, and then start without debugging, because we're not going to debug it, we just want it to execute. So that's going to be your Control F5 on Mac, or probably Control F5 on Windows. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And you'll see you selected gaming, what a thrill, so our gaming logic still gets executed because gaming happens. And then we've got down here, if selected thrill equals skiing, then it didn't get executed. Down here we get you did not select skiing right there, if you see that right there. All right. So now you'll notice that right here we've got this was executed and this was executed. Where is this output right here? So let's go ahead and run it again really quick. All right. So we have to ask ourselves now, why did this not get output? You did not select gaming. All right, so let's pick right back up from that. So why did this output not happen? So for that, we can go ahead and enter a debug on here. So if you go over here to the gutter in your code and you click right here, you'll get a red mark on the line that you selected in the gutter. And the cool thing about this is that when you do debug and you debug those breakpoints, you're going to see how the JavaScript runtime runs through your code. So right here, if selected thrill equals game, this code gets run, and you'll see that our debugger broke, or it stopped on the line where we put the breakpoint, or this little red dot, and we get this console.log. And you will see down here, it shows that the debugger is attached to our Node.js. It's watching this file as it executes. Now, if we step right now, we will see that console.log will get executed, and we get you selected gaming, what a thrill. Now, because this was executed, the entire if-else statement had something execute in it. And so because we have execution that happened, it moves on to the next block of code. And right here we have this if selected thrill equals skiing. Now it's going to do this check on this if-else statement. And as we see, because of course at this point in time selected thrill, if we look it up here in our local variables, selected thrill is right here. Let's expand this a little bit. We will see selected thrill gaming right there. All right. So now we will see that this particular line of code for this if-else block will get executed because this evaluated to false. So as we do that, we see that you did not select skiing. So let's go ahead and stop the debugger. Let's minimize that a little bit so we got more room. All right, let's get rid of our debugs. Okay, so this gives you a quick overview of the if-else statement and how they are executed and how they are used for branching code based on a logic tree based on if-else statements or expressions that evaluate to a yes or no, a true or false, a 1 or a 0. All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and make sure that our code is safe. So as I talked about at the beginning of the video, if you haven't watched the Git video module, make sure you go do that. And from this point forward, we're going to be using Git on every single video to make sure that we are practicing and using it to keep our code safe. So earlier, we went ahead and we created a new repository. Well, actually, we created a new folder in a repository that I already had set up under my dev, and then it was Neumont Studios. And then under JavaScript, we added this new folder, 05 if-else statements, and this is where we added that new code that we just went through in this video. So in order to make sure we get that code safe and up in a repository so that if our computer crashes, we have it safe, we're going to go ahead and open up a terminal so that we can, or a command prompt on Windows, and we're going to make sure that we keep that code safe by uploading it to Git. So right now you'll see that the command prompt has me. Let's see if I can increase the font on that. There we go. You'll see that I am currently in the Tim folder. So if we look at our computer right here, we are in the Tim folder, which is your user profile on the computer. And then under Dev and then Neumont Studios is where the repository is. So I need to get to that folder on my command prompt. So I'm going to go ahead and use the terminal command change directories. So that's cd. And I want to go to dev, which is currently in this folder. So if we do ls, you should see a list of directories that are currently available in this folder, which if you look at your Windows Explorer or your Explorer in Mac, you'll be able to see that under dev, well, under Tim, you should see all of these folders, and you'll see all of those folders listed right here in the command prompt. So we want to go to dev. So if we just do a cd dev and then do another ls, we should be able to see all of these folders. So courses, archives, good. And then we want to go to Neumont Studio. So Neumont Studio, you can see right here. So we're going to go ahead and change directory again. Go to Neumont Studios, and if we list it, we'll see JavaScript and README. Now, because Neumont Studios is the root of my repository, I'm going to go ahead and do a Git Status. And that's going to tell me the status of my repository. And as you'll see, I have uncommitted files or folders, and right now that JavaScript folder actually has not been added to my repository at all, which means all of this code that I have here under JavaScript, these 4 modules right here, 2 through 5, I actually haven't backed up that code at all in that repository. So I want to keep it safe, so I'm going to say git dot, I'm going to go do git add with a period. The period is just a wildcard. It just means add everything that needs to be added. So right here, it's this entire JavaScript folder. So by doing git.add, and then if I do git status, we'll now see that every file that was inside of that JavaScript folder has now been added from each of those folders, those subfolders that we have right here, the 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now that they're added, I can say git commit -m, and m is just a message saying what I'm committing and why. It gives me kind of comments or notes on every commit that I do to my repository so that I can remember what was done and what was committed. And right now, you can see I've got a whole bunch of modules that haven't committed. So I'm going to say initial commit of all JavaScript demo code for screencasts. Going to go ahead and hit enter on that. Now, when I did the .add, I really just added all these files or staged them to be added to my repository. In other words, I just told Git that, yeah, let's prep all these files to be added, but let's not add them yet. Let's just prep them for adding. And then when I did the commit, that's where all of these files were actually committed to my local repository. Now, as of right now, all these files have been committed to my local repository, but they haven't been uploaded yet to my remote repository. So we're going to go ahead and push those files up to my repository. And of course, you're going to need to do your login for your repository. And once you've done that, it should push everything up to your remote repository. So being that this is all covered in the Git videos, this is kind of a little bit of a refresher now that we're going to use Git in every video. But if you want to get into depth, make sure you go review those Git videos. So now I can do Git Status. Everything's up to date with my master, which is the remote origin master. And so now everything's good. All my code is safe, and we can move on to the next video and the next set of demo code.